Yeah, no importer. Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Okay, we were having some technical issues, which we managed to solve, fortunately. I want to thank you for your patience, and we will begin shortly with our first concurrent session. This is group number 4, just to make sure you are where you're supposed to be. On behalf of Unica, I would like to thank you for your attendance and your punctual connection. The protocol for today's session is the following. Every session will last for 15 to 20 minutes, and then we will grant a short period of time for your questions. Attending the protocol on the suggested agenda from 9 to 9:30. We'll start with L in the Unbeknownst Borderland, a queer gender identities construction rhapsody by Ale Álvarez-Contreras from Fundación Universitaria, Monserrate. Afterwards, at 9:30, we will move on to a documentary study, Tracing Research Skills, Teaching in Undergraduate Program Studies by Francisco Pérez and Paola Jimena Romero Molina from Fundación e Institución Universitaria Colombo-Americana Única. The presenter will be Professor Pérez. And finally, we will move on to textile and global literacies to open doors for language learning and intercultural understandings by Angela Giseli Castro Garces, PhD, and Anne Jennifer Vargas from Universidad del Cauca. So, to you all, welcome to our concurrent sessions. I would like to confirm that our presenters are with us today. So I would like to know if our first presenter is with us.
Yes, I'm here.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Finn. Okay, I would like to introduce Finn. Finn is a non-binary full-time English research and social studies teacher at Fundación Universitaria Monserrate. Finn holds a BA in Modern Languages from Universidad Pedagógica y Tecnológica de Colombia. Has also studied in an MA in Literature for 2 semesters at the same institution, and currently studies in education from the Diversities at Fundación Universitaria Monserrate. Finn is the director of TerraScript and researcher in areas of interest related to gender identity, construction of EFL environments, material designs, decolonial and critical pedagogies. Also in peace education. Finn, thank you very much for joining us, and the audience is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. Just to confirm, do I need to share the presentation, right?
Yes, please.
Okay, so give me a second to open it here, and then I'm going to share my screen. Give me just a moment. Okay, good. Give me just a second.
Also, I will be sharing the attendance link for you to be able to register your attendance.
Okay, can you see my screen now? Okay, great. So, well, first of all, thank you so much, Professor, and you attendees for being here. It is a pleasure for me to be part of this research space. So, well, as Professor already mentioned, my presentation today is entitled Ale in the Unbeknownst Borderland, a queer gender identities construction rhapsody. It was a research I carried out when I was finishing my degree, and it was directed by Professor Jonathan Vasquez. So in here, you're going to find the agenda. So today, well, we are going to talk a little bit about what was my research process as well as some results. You're going to find some similarities with the book Alice in Wonderland, because I consider that as a inspiration for this process. So first of all, we are going to get, getting into the borderland, which is researcher's positionality. Then we are going to move with the justification, statement of the problem, the research question and objective, then some theoretical uh, constructs we must consider, the methodology, data analysis and findings, conclusions, and so on and so forth. So to begin with, I consider it fundamental to share with you the standing point right now. So for me, being a researcher is to understand that the research is done by me. So although I'm not aware of that, although I don't want to, I become a part of the research. So I'm another participant in my research. That way, the research become a part of me, and I'm also becoming a part of the research. So it is fundamental in this type of studies because, as you will notice in some minutes, I follow a autobiographical narrative approach. So it is like fundamental not only to begin like sharing our research in the first person and with a narrative approach, but also to let our voices be heard through the research. Because when a research begins, is because of our interests and also because of our experiences. So I consider it fundamental, aside with those others you see on the screen, to let those voices and experiences be heard in the research process. So from then, I'm going to begin talking about the pool of hormones, dots and sorrow, which is basically the justification. So, well, I'm a queer non-binary teacher. So when I was an adolescent, it was not easy for me to be different than my partners. So it brought a lot of problems back then. So I had traumas related to invisibility, related to bullying, related to do not feel, let's say, as part of my scholar community back then. It developed a strong need to fit. So it was not enough to be myself because I needed to fit in the mold. So I needed to play football and share a lot of things with my male, let's say, peers in order for them to include me in their activities. As normally, when we are developing our identity, it is like super easy and it is something super frequent, the idea of begin comparing to others, right? We are not enough men because we are not the same as our male partner. So from that point, I began, I don't know, inquiring myself and also the whole scholar system in terms of gender. So in a senseless race on a poem, I began understanding and developing the statement of the problem. And I noticed that even though we are in the 21st century, schools are not yet safest places to develop authentic and diverse identities because heteronormative is still being imposed and promoted. So it leads to a lot of gender stereotypes in the educational scenarios. And those stereotypes later on are going to turn into roles. So we are going to be forced to be in coherence with those stereotypes. And in part, it is because of the lack of information regarding gender at language teaching programs. Because if our teachers, well, if we as teachers as well are not aware of gender, we cannot promote it or we cannot address it. But also, it is a lack of regulatory laws from the Ministerio de Educación Nacional and also from the curricula. So, curricula is not revealing or letting those voices be heard. Um, Finally, Jonathan and I consider that education for sure is a chrysalis to figure out ourselves because it is the space in which we are not only to acquire like knowledge to survive, but also we are going to share with other people. So let's consider that identities are shaped socially. So it is fundamental for us to share with other people to discover and figure it out who we are. So education plays a fundamental role in what we call like identity construction. From there, I consider two needs analysis. First of all, deconstructing myself through language, because as a non-binary teacher who teaches English and Spanish, it was not an easy task to begin considering myself as a non-binary person, not only in terms of language, but also in terms of how me or how I, as a teacher, can promote or invisibilize diverse identities. And also, it is pretty linked to the idea of becoming an English teacher, because fortunately, I had the opportunity to be a teacher in diverse schools who promote diversity. So it enriched my experience and also enriched my positioning to promote gender diversities in my classes. You're going to find in here the research question and the main objective. So what do three queer EFL learners' narratives reveal about their gender identity construction to comprehend narratively what three queer EFL learners' narratives reveal about their gender identities. In this chapter, advice from Storm Caterpillar, I address some theoretical foundation. So first of all, understanding decoloniality in the ELT, understanding coloniality as the imposition of external or foreign beliefs, gender roles, gender behaviors, cultural and social approaches. So Granados and Beltran 2022, and as well as Núñez Pardo 2022, let us know that there are three dimensions of colonialism. So coloniality of the self, of the knowledge, and of the power. Yep. So from that, we understand that we live in a cultural hegemony as we are still prevailing foreign and antique constructions, cultural and social cultural constructions over our own constructions. So it is important to begin being aware about how our ELT practices can deconstruct and can permeate and can overcome those colonialities in the three dimensions I just mentioned. Also, we must consider the queer theory, understanding queer as this evolving term that began being a way to refer to different people in a bad way, but then it turned into a powerful way to state that you are different and that you feel proud of being different. And from the queer theory, we began, understanding that gender is something we perform all the time, day by day, through our discourse, through our actions. That gender is dynamic, is fluid, it is an always changing process, but also we begin questioning what does it really mean to be a man or to be a woman or to be a non-binary person or a gender fluid person. So we began asking and querying masculinities and femininities constructions in our nowadays society. It led us to also talk about gender identities construction, understanding that we are always building ourselves. As I just mentioned, we are dynamic, we are not static. So it is important for us to understand that the person I am today, it is not going to be the same one than tomorrow's, because I'm going to be facing different experiences, different situations that are going to shape my identity. So in here, well, this is the methodology. So for sure, I follow a qualitative approach, an autobiographical narrative inquiry, and also I focus on the performative analysis, as I was not only interested in listening my participants' stories, but also in the way and the strategies they perform and consider when sharing them with me. The instruments I had were mainly artifacts and also phenomenological in-depth interviews, because I wanted to go in depth of some phenomena, but also I was pretending to continue inquiring about that phenomena and what it brought. So that's the reason why I, let's say, mixed in-depth interviews with phenomenological interviews. Ethical issues are so important in narrative research. So those are the principles I consider: beneficence, respect, autonomy, and identity, and as well as of justice. Well, now I'm going to share with you the results. So it is important to mention that in narrative research, we tend to divide our findings in narrative arcs. So in the pedal, I introduce my participants. In the answer, I explore in depth like what my participants have shared with me at three different moments. And finally, in the stigma, I share the interpretative phenomenological analysis, which is my overall analysis, and also the validation my participants gave to the story or the narrative I was able to interpret from theirs. So I'm going to introduce you to my participants. So we have Sam. They are a gender fluid person. We have Athena. She is a cisgender person with a bisexual orientation. And finally, we have Eve, which is also a cisgender girl who had a lesbian sexual orientation. So, well, in this first part, I'm going to focus on Sam. So as you can see here, these are like the artifacts we did. So we have the genderbread model in order for them to position themselves in terms of gender identity, gender expression, biological sex or sex assigned at birth, as well as social orientation. So with this, I had the intention to understand how they position themselves in terms of gender. As you can notice, I don't know if it is like possible for you to see it, but for sure in gender identity, Sam is a gender fluid person. So they are always flowing from masculine to feminine and so on. In terms of gender expression, some position themselves in between feminine and androgynous. In terms of sex assigned at birth, they position themselves as male, but it also added the you because they doesn't feel really comfortable with this. And in terms of sexual orientation, they position in non-heteronormative. So knowing a little bit more about Sam, Sam was, let's say, raised by both parents and also was extremely supported by their grandmother. It allowed them to develop themselves in a plural way, in a non-boundary way. So that's the reason why they developed this gender fluid identity, as they felt that gender is not static, it's always flowing, it's dynamic. So it is because of the background he was able to have with the family. In here in the autumn bloom, we have Athena. As you may see, in the gender identity, it is empty because for Athena, gender identity is something that you are always exploring. It is not static. It's something you figure it out day by day. So that's the reason why it is empty. She feels herself as feminine, as a female person, and also her sexual orientation is no heteronormative, as she felt herself back then as a bisexual girl. With her, it was interesting because although she feels as a cisgender girl, she does not consider gender as something static neither. So she felt that gender is something you build day by day. Indeed, she mentioned that she tries herself to avoid labels because she does not agree with them at all. She does not like labels at all, and she is always flowing, and she does not want to be limited by other people. Finally, we have Eve. As you can see, it is an interesting positioning, as she does not position herself neither in female or male. Her gender expression is totally free. Um, her biological sex is female, but she also feels something male in her, and also her sexual orientation is non-heteronormative. It was interesting because although, well, in comparison with Sam and Athena, she was not fully supported by her mom, which affected like a lot, as she was not able to position herself all the time in the way she would like to. So at the school, she was a different person than at home. And it was noticeable when you look at her interacting with her mother and the way also her mother interacted with her. So at the school, she was super free, she was super creative, but at home, she was so repressed because of that impossibility to position herself truly with her family. So in order for us to like conclude or try to found commonalities on those narratives, I have created like three categories. So first of all, ageism, because we as adults have a strong tendency to underestimate teenagers' experiences, as we consider that as they are younger than us, their experiences are not as valid as ours. So it is a tendency that silently is being violent towards them and towards their experiences. Secondly, that COVID-19 pandemic improve or not improve like, but allowed queer and diverse teenagers to explore different identities beyond the heteronormative ones, because as they were safe at their homes. They were using masks, so they were allowed to, I don't know, explore makeup, to connect with different people through the internet, and also to read and to get informed about different ways to be. Finally, the importance of diversity awareness, because although we were supposed to know about diversities, there are a lot of taboos over there, and they don't allow us, sorry, to progress and to give diversities the value they deserve. So those are like my advices. So it is like fundamental for us as teachers to promote critical thinking in our classroom. It does not matter if it is English as a foreign language or social studies or research, but we need to begin building critical thinking in our students, not only in terms of gender, but in terms of society and diversities in general. Also, it is essential to encourage our students to build their identities in a free way, right? So although we must like follow some curriculum aspects, it is like to invite you to include different strategies to encourage them to be their true selves in different scenarios. And finally, the importance and how needed is for us as teachers to begin having gender diversity courses, not only at bachelor programs, but also at master's programs, in order for us to become aware of diversities in their multidimensional aspects, and also for us to grant and promote those uh, diverse positioning from our students in our classrooms. Those are some of my references, and that's it. Thank you so much for your time and for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Professor Alvarez. Especially you sticked perfectly to the timing. So if there's any questions, they're more than welcome in the chat box, or even if you want to open up your cameras and come out and ask Professor Finn your questions, you'll be more than welcome. We have a question in the chat box. Luciana Macedo says, "What challenges have you found in this kind of research?"
Ooh, well, I found a lot. First of all, the idea of not sticking to a traditional approach in terms of research was a challenge, because as I did it narratively, portraying my experiences, also considering Alice in Borderland, in Wonderland, sorry, as an inspiration, my research was underestimated. So I was not able to get graduated with this project, unfortunately, and that was one of the, let's say, challenges I had. Also, well, to find theory. Nowadays, we can find more theory in terms of queer identities and LGBTQ plus students and teachers and all of that. But back then, it was not that easy. So that was another challenge. Fortunately, thanks to Professor Castañeda and his students, we have more information about this in Colombian journals. So it gave us a broader and realistic perspective about how is it treated in Colombia, but that back then it was another challenge. And finally, the it was not like resistance, but maybe how can I say it? Like fear, fear of being permitted by this kind of research proposals, because for sure we as researchers have a perspective. So the idea of seeing something different that may be quiet, that maybe, I don't know, questioned or criticized is fearful. So that was another challenge my director and I faced back then.
Thank you very much, Professor. We have yet one more questions to conclude. Larry says, "Hello, Professor. Good morning. I would like to ask how we can help students or colleagues who are discovering or struggling with their sexual orientation or gender identity, since some Colombian institutions try to suppress their queerness or their communities."
Okay, well, I'm going to ask from my experience. Then when I was developing that project, I began including like cartoons in my classes. So nowadays we have a lot of cartoons that define gender normative in different ways. So with them, they were 10th graders. So with them, I began It is a series that explore like the path we walked to become teenagers in terms of hormones, in terms of identity. So it was a way that helped me to connect with them and also to understand and to remember what it meant to be a teenager. Also to explore literature. So, I mean, as English teachers, we have a lot of possibilities. So you can connect with media in order to media literate your students in diversity. You can use literature, also in music, in movies. So it is to explore the resources we have available and try to invite them in discussion in English. Nowadays, I'm a teacher, educator. So with my girls, what I'm doing is that through performative writing and expanded writing, we are exploring feminism, we are exploring female voices in literature, and I'm trying to encourage them to begin portraying themselves. So we are doing right now some performative uh, exercises, and that way, by knowing like the feminist struggle, by knowing the theory, by understanding and also violating uh, the possibility you have today to speak, they can be encouraged and they can become aware of the need and the importance their positioning have, not only as women, but also as future teachers. So those are like the strategies. And finally, there is an author, which is Miller 2015, and this author created the queer literacy framework. So this person proposed 10 principles in order to become, well, I'm sorry, to turn classes into queer, allied, queer aware, queer focused classes. So those are like 10 principles and they are like really interesting. This author published a book, you can find it online, and you're going to find different strategies from different teachers around the world relating their practices in terms of queer literacy framework.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your insights, for sharing your knowledge with us, and you're always welcome to UNICA.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And to all the attendants and attendees and those who just arrived, remember to register your attendance. Find the link in the WhatsApp in the chat box, and also you will find another link to access each of the sessions. We are moving on to our next session, which is on behalf of UNICA. We are having Professor Francisco Perez, and this is a documentary study, which is called Tracing Research Skills, Teaching in Undergraduate Program Students, carried out by Professor Francisco Perez and Professor Jimena Romero Molina. As I said before, this is on Institución Universitaria Colomboamericana, and the presenter will be, please correct me if I'm wrong, Professor Francisco Perez, or both professors will be presenting, not quite sure.
Both of us. Hello.
Welcome, you're more than welcome, professors. Allow me to introduce you to the audience. Professor Francisco Perez holds a Bachelor in Arts in English and Spanish from Universidad Pedagógica Nacional of Colombia, a master's degree in teaching Spanish as a foreign language from UNINI, Puerto Rico, and a master's in TEFL from UNINI, Mexico, and a PhD in education in UNINI, Mexico as well. His research interests include teachers' education, formative research, metacognitive strategies, material design, and intercultural competences, among others. Professor Paula Jimena Romero holds a Bachelor of Arts in Philology and Languages with an emphasis of English from the National University in Colombia, and a master's degree in TESOL from Michigan State University. Jimena has taught in different levels in various institutions such as UNICA, where she currently teaches English pronunciation and assessment courses. Her major research interests include vocabulary pronunciation and research skills teaching. So professors, welcome, and the audience is all yours.
Good morning. Thank you. So before we start, I just want to make sure that you can see my presentation.
It's loading. Yeah, it's already there.
Okay, right, so let me just set it there. And okay, okay. Thank you, James, for the introduction and the warm welcoming. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here with you in this event this morning. As James already said, we are presenting on behalf of UNICA with Francisco Perez, my colleague and research partner, and well, I'm Jimena Romero, and let's start. We want to tell you about our synthetic literature review studies, which is the title we've given it, regarding the teaching of research skills in undergraduate programs with reservist teachers. So to start, Francisco, well, we've decided like to have a sort of a conversation to present this research lead review to you today. So I want to invite Francisco to give us the context of this literature review.
Okay, thank you, Professor Romero, um, for inviting me to hold this dialogue. We didn't want to present this in a very structured way, but just more like a conversation. Well, as Jimena was saying, this synthetic literature review is framed within a much bigger project, right? We have been working on this over the last year and a half. And we, in general terms, we wanted to unveil what was going on about the teaching of research skills to make sense of what we were doing at that moment and what we have been doing as a thesis advisors, and in my case, as a research professor, a professor from the research component. So we wanted basically to gain an overview of how all the bachelor programs in teacher education at a national and global arena have approached or addressed the teaching of research skills. So, Jimena, could you please then give us a picture of what we decided to have as the objectives and questions?
Yes, yes. So, well, for this literature review, we thought about um, some questions and objectives to guide us. And then the question that we thought of was, what do research studies reveal about how research skills teaching has been addressed in undergraduate programs with reservist teachers? And to help us answer that question, we thought about a couple of questions there, which were the first one, how has research skill teaching been approached and conceived of in bachelor's programs in teacher education? You're going to see that by approaching, we mean like the different strategies, such as courses or the exercises that are proposed, or other instances such as seed beds, yeah, which are the different means that um, programs like in the programs have proposed how to promote and how to teach skills, research skills. And concept of is concerned more about with the perception, both by students, let's say stakeholders, by students, by teachers, and by those involved in the process. Our second question was, what appear to be the most salient trends and gaps in the studies that document such approach? And yeah, so our objectives are connected to those questions there to gain an overview, yeah, of those research skills, and then to describe the ways in which research skills has been approached, and also and they identify some main trends and gaps that we could perceive by analyzing those documents. Yeah. Okay. So, Francisco, we can tell our audience about the constructs that we took into account to carry out this lit review.
Okay. Thank you, Jimena. Now I'm going to give you like a whole picture of what the constructs pertaining to the theoretical framework are. First, and on top, we had to visit and revisit some concepts such as research skills. We encountered on the way these quite instrumental authors as Lopez et al., who claim that when you teach people to do research, you have to bear in mind three main skills. We find basic research skills as the ones that all undergraduate programs have to develop. And they have to do basically with these skills related to logical thinking. Some examples are analyzing, synthesizing, the ability to compare, right? And we find other skills that they call general skills. Inside these specific skills, there are skills that, for example, have to do with programs in terms of the ability to look for information, to organize it, and to know what to do with that information. Sometimes the students find the information and they don't know what to do with that and what to make out of that information. We find a second category of skills that has to do with specific skills to a given discipline. In our case, as we belong to a bilingual program, so has to do with the ability to, for instance, spot a problem, diagnose it, understanding from the linguistic perspective, and provide a solution to that problem. And finally, something important we find, according to Lopez et al., is the ability to do research, particularly in pedagogical arena. They call pedagogical research skills, and that has to do mainly with those projects that are framed within an action research project, which conveys, for example, visiting school, understanding the context, and then providing workshops or what we call in Spanish intervenciones pedagógicas. And then we have Jimena Montes de Oca, right? Montes de Oca talks
Yes.
about the ability that student teachers, pre-service teachers have in terms of professional skills. That means that there is this compilation of everything they have learned throughout a major. That includes what they have learned academically, and then what they have learned, for example, in a teaching practical. All of these comes together, comes down in one document that we tend to call either thesis or degree project. So, Jimena, could you please then give us more perspectives into research training based on Espinosa et al. And Guerrero?
Yes. Yes, based on these authors, because something that we found as well, I think we said it at the beginning, but this is this lit review. It's part of a bigger project that we have been working on at our institution at UNICA. And then we started to find this construct of research skills and research training. And well, we found that it's really a big one, let's say. But then following this, two authors, Espinosa et al. And Guerrero, um, we found that there are two main ways in which research training can be approached. One of those is by teaching the theory about research, which is like understanding what research is. Yeah. And for example, in the case of a thesis, knowing like that there are different sections there, and also thinking about the skills that need to be developed for each of those sessions. And then it can be approached by practical exercises in class, yeah, in the different courses that students are taking, in which they have like, let's call this mini research project in which they think about a question and they try like to answer that question in a way that is informed, yeah. Uh, and also, it has to do with the idea that teachers uh, have a role as researchers, right? So that would be like a general way to approach it. The other way, the stricter or the more specific way to approach it, it's by going, let's say, to a higher level into the development of those research skills. And that is something that students do through their thesis, when they write their thesis documents and when they carry out all this research process. And then based on that, some of them can see maybe beyond being a teacher researcher, which we think or we believe with Francisco that we all are like teacher researchers. Some of them may go farther and publish, right? So in that sense, they need to, let's say, go deeper into the development of those skills. So you want to tell us maybe very briefly about
Yes.
thesis writing?
Yeah, yeah, we don't want to run out of time. Then thesis
Yeah.
writing, in line with what Jimena was telling us, is that big, huge opportunity that reservist teachers have to improve academically speaking in terms of writing. For example, being able to describe a problem that they have come across with in a typically and ordinarily in an educational setting. So it's like this huge document where they can depict and display that they have improved academically as well as professionally. And then the last construct is that documentary research. According to Molina, documentary research should not be confused with just doing a lit review. It's more than that. It goes beyond that. It's not just compiling documents, but merely finding gaps that will give sense to what we are researching at the moment. And with those gaps, we know from which areas we can depart, we can start, and then we give sense to those areas, and then we have the ability to critically propose something. So, Jimena, now that we are over with a theoretical framework, could you please give us some light onto the methodology steps that we follow?
Yes. Okay. So I'm sorry. Yeah. So this is the methodology that we follow for the documentary research that we were talking about, and it was we follow it. This is framed within a qualitative paradigm. It was a synthetic literature review, and the others follow there were Temple and Pare. We found the articles that we studied in on Google Scholar, some universities, repositories, and Schohout. And then we followed a 6 steps analysis proposed by Parade and Kitsu. These are the 6 steps that we followed. So very briefly, formulating the research question, and then searching the existing literature, then screening for inclusion, deciding on the inclusion and exclusion criteria. After that, we assess the quality of the primary sources that we have, and then we started to extract the data, going through the color coding process and the creating some categories to analyze the data. Yeah, which
And
is
now,
also yes.
and now,
Sorry.
just to be brief, like we collected the data, which means that data was gathered and compiled on a document. Then we summarized it. We aggregated the data, which means that we try to find the first emerging categories. And then we organized and compared those pieces of information, data sets, finding similarities, differences. And then we decided for the best graph to present that information. Now we are going to show you the categories that emerge, the findings that prevailed. So Jimena, can you tell us a bit about the ways to approach research skills teaching that was salient in most of the programs?
Yes. So what we found there, okay, so these are the 3 main categories that we came out with. And we found that, yes, definitely research skill teaching is prioritized. One of the main means to do that is action research. We think this is due to practical reasons in the sense that students have to do a practicum, and in the context of that practicum, students can put into practice or can implement a way of teaching, and then that is a moment that has the conditions for them to collect data and propose a project, right? Also, we found out that there are courses that the programs offer courses, yeah, which are called Metodología de la Investigación, for example, Francisco, or other similar courses in which students are taught about both the theory and they also carry out some exercises, yeah? What else can you tell us, Francisco?
Okay, so then research has been approached through practical exercises. So as Jimena was mentioning earlier in the presentation, we have the possibility to do exercises in class, outside classes. Students have the possibility to join research bed seats. They have the opportunity to be research assistants. And we have realized that at UNICA, we have all of that. Probably one area where most programs have not succeeded in would be like how to join the thesis, connect the thesis to the elaboration of artifacts, like how to prioritize creativity and inventiveness. Now, talking about that, Jimena, we are going to move along now to the next finding that
Mhm.
has to do with ways to conceive research skills teaching. One of those is like teaching research skills has to do with making the experience meaningful. Universities tend to focus more on research than inquiry, but inquiry is present everywhere, like asking questions, looking for the best sources, uh, collaborating with others to find a solution to questions that not necessarily are systematized, are formulated in a document. So that was really important to find. Something that was found was that formative research is significant and transcendental, particularly when we have the ability to connect it to social context. So it's not just about going to a school. Students have the possibility to go to different social scenarios. And then that's another possibility to do research. As we were mentioning before, especially in the study by Garcia Hernandez, there is this sense of highlighting that research education should be connected to the creation of artifacts. This is proper and particular of programs like, let's say, engineering or programs related to arts, design, right? And finally, here, one finding that is illuminating is that in some programs, research is conceived of as the opportunity that the students have to read, discuss, inquire, and write as the researchers, because that is absolutely, let's say, difficult how to author, in their own voice, how to author a document that they are doing for the first time. And then, Jimena,
Mhm.
let's just briefly to connect with the conclusions. Let's give them some insights into the gaps and
Mhm.
the opportunities that we found in this research, documentary
Yes.
research.
Yes, sure. Okay, we will briefly present some of the trends that we found. Well, as I said before, priority has been given, especially by means of action research, right? And also in those in that teaching of research skills, there has been great contributions. There have been great contributions to applying general research skills, right? Yes, some difficulties persist, let's say, connected to the application, as Francisco explained before, of specific research skills. Um, some of the gaps that we found were the scarcity strategies to make the project elaboration process easier for students. However, there are some studies that precisely are working on how to promote new strategies or to promote ways to cope with that situation in which, yes, students are being taught research skills, but still it's hard for them like still to analyze, for some to analyze or synthesize or make or create a coherent design. So some proposals have started to emerge. Yeah. And also we're working on a project, for example, to describe in a closely way how the accompaniment that teacher educators give in their classes, and also advisors, thesis advisors give to students can help them succeed in developing those research skills. Yeah. And well, these are our conclusions there. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know, Professor Ferrero, do we have
Do we have
time,
any minutes?
or
Yes.
this is the time left for questions?
Yeah, unfortunately, we ran out of
Okay.
time. However,
Okay.
I don't see any questions yet in the chat box. If anybody has a question, please feel free to open up your camera and say it to the presenters. Otherwise, I guess we can use the questions times to go for your conclusions.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning.
Sandra?
Hello.
Hello, dear Professor, Professor Romero and Perez, thank you very much. And well, I've got a question about, well, your insights on other skills, what you think about including other skills in research, like, for example, the ones that have to do with what it takes to approach and work with people, especially when we are talking about action research, right? That we are dealing with a lot of people all the time. Showing vulnerability, for example, in front of what we call participants, so that we, as researchers, can be open enough to embrace the other without imposing our views as researchers. And skills like, for example, to be able to recognize what we have done well, but also the challenges that we have faced along the process, and especially more than recognizing, trying to write about both the strengths of us as researchers, but also our weaknesses. So, what do you think those skills? Or what the role of those skills can be when we research and when we are preparing other people to learn how to do it. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm gonna answer like for my my view. As we've researched, uh, we found out, we said that there are not, the studies don't really give a lot of details, yeah, sometimes. But for example, for other documents that we have explored for the project that we've been working on, there are descriptions, like more detailed descriptions of what happens to students when they are when they are in a master program or in a PhD. And definitely, Sandra, we can see other skills that are touched upon. For example, they talk about some social aspects, yeah, and also social emotional aspects, right, that have to do with the success of writing a thesis. Like sometimes there are other factors, or let's call them skills too, that besides, yeah, the research skills, that also play a role in their coming out, in their developing a successful project. I don't know, Francisco, if you want to say something else.
Well, I completely agree with that, Sandra, with the inclusion of other skills. At least we can do it, progressively. And I just recollect now that um, something I'm used to telling my students is like, hey, beyond all those scientific and academic skills that you are expected to display in the document, something that is always important is honesty. And now that you mentioned that, it's not just about what went well, but about challenges. I think that at UNICA, particularly over the last year, we included something that we called in Spanish limitaciones, right? So I always tell them this is a very enriching chapter in which you are going to deal with the difficulties and also how you overcame them. Because traditionally, as you posted in the question, when you read the documents, the degree projects, you tend to believe that everything was perfect, right? Everything went according to plan, and it's great to do then ethnographies, case studies. So I think that at UNICA particularly, we are opening up the spectrum, new horizons, right? New studies. And in the past, I know that probably, and at some point, action research was prevailing, but I think that now there is this wide array of possibilities. So thank you, Professor Rojas, for your question.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Romero and Professor Perez. It was absolutely enlightening. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and experience in research with us. All right, and you're more than welcome to stay for the following presentation.
Thank you.
And then don't forget to assess or to evaluate the presentations. You have the links in the chat box. Also for the attendance, for those who haven't done it yet. We have Diana Rocio Garzon in the chat box. She says, I really celebrate this presentation, keeping in mind there is lots of information. It's always important to specify the prompt to be able to research thoroughly and move forward from interpretation to intertextuality. Thanks for the reflection. Thank you, Diana, for participating. And then it's about time for us to move on to our last presentation in this concurrent session. I would like to welcome the following presenters of the talk, Textile Text and Global Literacies to Open Doors for Language, Learning, and Intercultural Understandings by PhD Angela Giseli Castro Garces and Jennifer Gomez Vargas from Universidad del Cauca. I wonder if both the presenters are here.
Yeah, we are here. Good morning. I'm
Good
trying to open
morning.
my camera. Jennifer, I can see you, but my camera doesn't open. So anyhow, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Angela Castro from Unicauca, and I'm very happy to be sharing with you this space. And this is my colleague, Annie. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Angela. Could you please share it to the screen?
Sure.
Professors, thank you very much. Welcome. And in the meantime, you get it all set. I would love to introduce you to the audience. Angela Castro Garces holds a BA in Modern Languages. She's a specialist in reading and writing pedagogy, has a master's degree in English didactics and a PhD in education with an emphasis in English language teaching and intercultural communication. Her publications include poetry book chapters, and articles on teachers' education, professional development, and language learning, intercultural communications, fonts of knowledge, and global literacies and multiliteracies. Angela is a full-time professor at Universidad del Cauca in Popayán, where she works in undergraduate and master's programs in education.
Thank you.
Annie Jennifer Gomez Vargas holds a BA in elementary education with emphasis in Spanish and English and has a master's degree in education. She's a doctoral student in education science at Universidad del Cauca. Her academic interests include English teaching and learning processes, pedagogical practices, literacy and embroidery as a sociocultural practice. Annie is a professor in the Department of Education and Pedagogy at Universidad del Cauca. She works in a master's program in education. Professors, thank you very much. And this has been a long expected topic to us all in UNICA.
Thank you so much. We're gonna start the presentation. I don't know, you can see my screen now. I'm trying to.
Yes, but yes, could you please close the office message?
I'm trying to. Give me a second. It doesn't close. Okay, got it.
There, thank you. And maybe put it bigger, the complete screen.
I don't know if my camera is on now. Can you see me now?
He's not, Professor.
Not yet.
Okay. Okay, but go ahead. I'll try to do it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much for being here and welcome. Today we are going to share with you textile text and global literacies to open doors for language learning and intercultural understanding. And we are here, Angela Castro and Jennifer Gomez. Next one.
Sure.
Okay, the context where we work was a team of professors of education programs at Universidad del Cauca. The next one, please. We work a series of workshops as part of a professional development program. In this case, we are going to share with you a specific experience that we had around textile text and global literacies. The main purpose of this was to encourage telling life stories through the waving of threads represented in quipus, communicating in English to develop intercultural understandings. This workshop was developed in 4 phases. First, we started with a poem by Angela Castro, who is here. Then we conceptualize about textile text and global literacies Then we experienced through the making of quipus, and finally, participants reflected on their experience and learning. As we did with professors, we want to share the research we have done on textile text and global literacy so far. I'm going to talk about advanced textile text. First, a quipu. What is the meaning of quipu, or what a quipu is? It's an alphanumeric system. It's mainly found in Incas communities in Latin America. It's a complete system for writing and reading that is composed by colors, knots, and spaces that communicate a message. So in this workshop, we encourage our professors, our teachers to design to do their own quipus. About textile texts, the next one, please. We consider textile text, that's the name that we have assigned to that kind of text, a complete reading and writing system. The history has been read and written through the eye of the needle, and embroidery, which is a specific technique to do these textile texts, is no more a feminine job. It's not just a hobby or to keep people silent. It has become a multimodal way to communicate. So multimodality is really important for us in this experience. I'm gonna talk about some important textile texts in the world and in Colombia. So the first one is the suffragette handkerchief. This is a text that shows women's struggle for the right to vote. It was made by 68 women who were in prison for fighting for their rights. They weren't allowed anything to communicate with, but they asked very cleverly for a needle and a thread that seemed helpless or useless. But with that, they embroidered their signatures. The signature was the proof of their existence. Then we have another 2 examples of textile text. We have Tracy Amen with the piece Everyone I Have Ever Slept With, and Ana Teresa Barbosa from Peru. Tracy Amen from England. She embroidered and sew a tent, as you can see, with the names of people she had slept with in her life. This was a really disruptive text, but when people enter to the tent, they see the names like my grandmother, my bear, my cat, my teddy bear, and that changed their minds about the meaning of this piece and the name that she put to this piece as well. Then we have here Ana Teresa Barbosa. This is an example of a textile text. She used cross stitch, punto de cruz, which is a really traditional stitch in our context, but she used it in a different way. She carried out about the inner of our bodies. She goes beyond the beauty stereotypes, and she shows that we are all the same but different at the same time. And she uses this technique in a not very traditional way. Then we have in Colombia, another textile text. This is done by Gunadule women. They live between Panama and Colombia. And these texts are named molas. Mola is a complete writing system that shows the correct way of life. And the woman in this case is the keeper of the wisdom. They sew these pieces on their clothes, and these patterns will stop evil and attract the good, good things. Another important experience around textile texts is las bordadoras. This is an example of arpillera. It's an arpillera technique, sorry. Kind of patchwork. In this case, women met to embroider and to talk about this terrible experience that they have lived and talk to heal. This is the representation of the massacres and displacement in Maria la Baja. They talk about what happened that day, and they also talk about the past and the future. I'm going to read something that we found really interesting. Después de secarse las lágrimas una y otra vez, de tomar aire y elevar una oración, volvían a tomar la aguja para ponerle la ropa a cada figura humana. El hermano Luis tenía un pantalón así, decía la una. La señora Guadalupe tenía su pelito blanco, muy blanco, contestaba otra al extremo opuesto del tejido. Cada mujer aportaba un recuerdo, una idea, un pedazo de tela. Así construyeron su primer tapiz. So we can see a really interesting example of textile text in Colombia related to violence and also to healing. And finally, in Colombia, we have another textile books that is very representative, and is León, a diary of León. That's the name of the text. This is a textbook, a textile book, sorry, designed by stories and embroidery for healing. This was made by men embroiders from La Picota jail. So it's interesting to see how textile texts can help to break the stereotypes of men, and of course, men in prison. In Popayán, here in Unicauca, in Universidad del Cauca, we started in the pandemic and the social August times a work around textile texts. We have here 3 examples. We work in community with this bridge. This is La Avenida de los Estudiantes, and people propose to spin, to knot in the bridge. La solidaridad es la ternura de los pueblos. There was also a commemorative event in the name of Esteban. Esteban was one of our hard students in the strikes. And also we have here on the right a quilt that was made by the union of different pieces, mostly about how women lived the pandemic times and social August. We tried to expose this quilt in a place, name under a woman's name, but we didn't find one here in Popayán, so we exposed it on men's places. People read the messages, some of them agreed, some of them were not so happy with the messages, but that was a really interesting experience to do with our students and in Popayán. And finally, in Unicauca, we also have this workshop that is named Voices and Silences in Unicauca, and the main question around the workshop was, how do you feel being a woman here in Unicauca? We work with a deaf woman to explore different languages, and participants embroidered signs of Colombian sign languages to express their feelings, their messages. Here we have 2 examples. Vulnerable is one of them, and the other one that we consider is really interesting is She Overflows, because this person did the metaphor between embroidery and also her life. Ella se desborda. So in the same of embroidery, desbordar and overflow at the same time. With this in mind, these experiences and others made us realize the potential that textile texts and its relationship with global literacies have. We explore a traditional technique, a traditional work, mainly for women, and a stereotype technique to talk about something different, gender, social issues, breaking stereotypes, to know ourselves and the others. So we saw this as a great focus on cultural understanding. And with this in mind, we propose a series of workshops with professors here in the Department of Education.
Good, thank you very much. I'm sorry, I can't open my camera. I'm gonna start talking like that. If it opens, that would be great. Thank you, Jennifer, for that introduction and of textile texts. So we got to connect those textile texts, as you mentioned, with global literacies. And then from a multiliteracy perspective. So this is the workshop we gave. Here I am reading poems to the professors to start our workshop, because I wanted to show them my story in order to talk from an individual basis. Warsan Shah says, "No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark." These are the words of Malala Yousafzai, the youngest Nobel Peace Prize. And this is part of a book called We Are Displaced, which is a book that talks about displacement around the world, girls who have been displaced in different parts, and then how we can connect those texts to what happens here in Colombia. So global literacy is basically connect the local to the global and then to the local again, how we can see ourselves mirror in other people's stories, and we are able also to share our own stories. We did this from what Copan Calansis called 3M's perspective, that is multicultural, multilingual, and multimodal, taking into account diverse modes of communication. Toni Morrison says that we overgeneralize and we other until we come to know individual stories of those others and realize they are people just like us, that we have to know as the stories they represent. So this is connecting how it's important to hear people's individual stories in order to get them to know on an individual basis. Then I introduced the talk with professors here at my university through who I am. Therefore, I have the role of a mother, a woman first, a mother, and also of a teacher educator. Therefore, my different roles, and I also love poetry and I write poetry. So I started with this poem, How Much Love, a poem that I wrote to my daughter. I loved you before we met and I still love you today. I'll make sure to keep some love. I'll make sure it never ends. But what do I really mean if my love endless should be? Overall, when I have met someone as lovely as you. That person who changed my name from common woman to mother, that little creature who in my arms I have hugged like no other. I love you, my precious daughter. I love you with all my heart. I hope you're a happy person. I want you to enjoy life. To be as happy as possible, to be a role model too, to be patient and to love just the way I do love you. So in that case, we raise awareness, we show our sensitive side and show that this part that has to do with research, with education, with all these processes are mainly human processes. So we show ourselves in these processes. Kathy Shore, who is a researcher from the University of Arizona, says that she sees in global literacies the potential of global literature for building understanding, intercultural understanding through global and local connection. And here we have a little text that was embroidered and says, she's an old soul with young eyes, a vintage heart, and a beautiful mind. These are some of the books that we introduced when we developed these workshops that have to do with global literacies. Some of them are videos, some others are printed books or cartoon books. The first one is a story of a little boy who had certain physical difficulties. So when he wasn't sent to school because of that, because his town, he lives in a small town in Ghana, and his people thought that because he had cognitive difficulties, he couldn't be like a person who couldn't go to school. Therefore, everything revolves around that. But then they realize that he has a lot of potentials. Then on the right, we had the story of Dear Primo, which is a bilingual story that shows how people connect between the borders of the United States and Mexico. And then people speak both languages and are into two different cultures. And then we have The Danger of a Single Story by Chimamanda Adichie, who says that our stories matter and that we have to tell our stories in first person, because if we allow other people to tell our stories, then it's going to be a whole different story, and so on. We continue connecting stories. On the bottom left, we have Nadia Lopez Garcia, who is a Mexican poet. She calls herself a Mexican indigenous poet, and who struggled a lot because of her language difference. Her mother, for example, didn't speak her language because she was ashamed. But then she tried to kind of revive her language and give her language power. And then she got to do that because she got to go to university. And then we had the story of Gucci Gucci, which shows difference and how a crocodile is raised by ducks, and shows the story of Taiwan's culture. Therefore, these stories take place in specific regions, but going beyond what they're being called, and you're going beyond a nationalist perspective that is trying to connect with diversity and going beyond stereotypes. Telling one's stories from past to future, and this is what the workshop with professors at the university had to do with. We introduced alphabetic and non-alphabetic practices through textile texts to develop manual skills while connecting with the individuality of their stories and with the ideas of others. They explore English as a language through which they orally express their experiences. What is interesting is that this is part of a series of workshops, of professional development workshops that we develop with professors in our pedagogy department. So every professor may have a different background, academic background, so they are not English professors. Therefore, the language was also a challenge for them. So we explored language at the same time that we were exploring other possibilities, seeing language not just as the ultimate goal, but as a means of communication, of exploring different languages. So they also share their stories by explaining colors, shapes, and their relationship with textiles, reflecting the experience of telling stories in first person as a possibility to embrace their own identity. Each color in the quipu represented a past, current, or future part of their lives. And knots had different sizes and shapes. What we did was to give them 4 different threads for different pieces of yarn to connect. So each one represented one part of their life. For example, red meant love, green meant the relationship with nature, purple meant challenges, and yellow meant future plans. Therefore, every knot that they tied represented one experience. And after that, they had to tell the stories through the different knots that they had mentioned. What were those remarkable moments in their lives and how they could build their stories very easily by connecting the knots. And some of them did what is shown in the picture to connect or to put all the colors together, showing that their different life, or how their different life experiences also connected among each other. So that was interesting as well. These materials represented the memory of all those who wove messages, which at the same time became part of the multiple ways of reading and writing in a work charged with personal and collective meanings. Because there were many experiences behind everyone, and it was nice because they were not only sharing the stories with us, who were the leaders of the workshop, but also among themselves. The experience developed in a pedagogy department with professors of diverse education programs revealed multiple stories. The desire to learn about each other's stories began with our experiences, which emerged unwittingly among interwoven verses. So they were knitting, they were nodding at the same time, they were talking to the person next to them, they were laughing. So this was a very remarkable experience, and a workshop that had to do with their professional development, but went beyond the academic walls or the academic barriers that we sometimes have. As a space open up for getting to know others, we did so from their sensibilities and logic, from their subjective experiences as crunch pulses, which connected with the experiences of others, with those connections that we can make with all those ideas that come from within and that we hardly ever get to know, because we're usually revolving around the academic world and we don't give times to see that other, that is the subjective other that is next to us. Reading and writing processes based on multiliteracies constituted a pedagogical strategy that took into account the social and cultural fabric of each person involved in this process. Approximating the pedagogical possibilities achieved from a multiliteracies perspective gave rise to a reflection that began with our own conceptions and connected with textile texts and global literacy. It is interesting, and this happens also in classes when we have workshops, that students wait, like they are usually told what to do. But when professors start with the example, when we as professors show from our own lives and experiences, then they become more motivated to also tell their stories. In addition to breaking the paradigm of the difficulty of communicating in a foreign language, a pedagogy of multiliteracies mediated by textile texts and global literacies foster moments of sharing multiple stories and provided opportunities for expression in diverse ways that transcended gender, ethnicity, and mode, thus developing intercultural understandings. And another barrier that we broke was that we had them use their bodies as they were talking. They could be using their hands, they could be talking about their feelings, so what came from within. Therefore, that was also a different way to put a story or to give life to specific stories. So that was our experience, and professors at the end, they were very happy to have been part of a workshop like this, and up to date, they still remember that experience, and they kind of lose themselves to telling their own stories. And that was the experience. Thank you very much. I don't know if you have any questions, or Annie, you have something else to mention.
All right. We don't have any questions yet in the chat box, but I wonder if any of the attendees has a question that you want to share with the professors. Feel free to turn on your microphone or camera and share it with us. I'm getting a question via private message. Probably the person wants to remain anonymous, but it says, I'm gonna paste it here. Okay, so based on this experience, what recommendations would you give to other language educators who want to implement multiliteracies and global literacies through non-alphabetic practices?
Okay, thank you so much for the question. Go ahead, Annie.
Thank you very much. I think the most important thing is to get to know your context. You have to think about if they are little kids, high school, or maybe adult people, and try to know what are their interests. In this case, we found out that textile text was a good strategy, but maybe you can find other, for instance, music, I don't know, maybe murals. So it's really important to get to know the context to see what is something that they really like. Maybe they don't have present in their lives, like they don't do it all days, every day, but it's something that they have as a knowledge from their families or from the context. For example, here in Cauca, we are really related to textile text because of different indigenous or different cultural practices. So we found that really linked with our group of people. And also, hi, I can see you.
Hi, finally.
Finally. And also stories. We think that it's really important to give voice to people, and that happens with human beings in all ages.
Thank you very much. That is true. I think we have a very rich cultural context here, as Annie was mentioning, but that is Colombia itself. Cauca is a very intercultural, pluri-ethnic department, but Colombia itself is like that. So everywhere in Colombia, we find this variety of contexts, of scenarios, these many possibilities. So working with a multiliteracy perspective is possible as we approach diverse modes, as we welcome different experiences, as we take advantage of what we have at hand. Everywhere we can see murals, we can see people, I don't know, doing different things. People, for example, in the market, we can read whatever is out there. We can read our contexts, and that is a very good way to do so. What is happening around our educational institutions? What kind of people do we find? What kind of houses? What is the environment like? We can read all of that, and that becomes a multiliteracy perspective that we can take advantage of for education.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Professor Castro and Professor Gomez. And to all the participant professors, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us on behalf of UNICA. I would like to tell you that we cherish and we appreciate every single word you share with us and all the attendees. Also, thank you for your connectivity. And we are going now on a short break. I'll see you again at 10:45 in a plenary session via YouTube, in the YouTube stream. Find the link in your agendas. I'll be more than glad to share it here in a moment. Thank you very much to everyone. Have a lovely rest of
Thank you, Professor James.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. great experience.
Thank you.